Hello and welcome here again to this part 2 of week 4. We're going to be looking at a couple of the Wiley Plus exercises. We're going to start out with the problem that we have assigned in Wiley, the problem 18-3A. It's also from chapter 4 if you're using the non-combined book, 4-3A. With this first one, and again we're talking about ABC costing, which is the activity-based costing. The simple method, the traditional method, is to simply take when allocating your factory overhead costs. So these are all the costs that it's hard to give to individual products or individual areas like sawing or whatever we're looking at, but it's kind of hard to distinguish who gets what to add into their cost. And so one easy way is just base it on machine hours or labor hours. And that's what they're doing here at the beginning. They're saying, well, originally we like to do things just based on machine hours and that's it. But some things like purchasing or inspecting utilities may have nothing to do with machine hours. So in some cases it's better to go ahead and allocate cost based on different activities. Like what it's called, activity-based costing. So in this example, they have they have 7 activities that they could potentially allocate their costing to maybe be a little bit more effective and not quite so generic. So they've shown here that we have $995,780 to be distributed somehow amongst our product. Because it's cost we have to account for and add into the price. Well, the original method here is simply by doing it over 100,000 hours. We believe there are going to be 100,000 hours of machine work being done. And we're just going to allocate that based on that. So what that's saying is if to make a product only required 1 hour of machine work, then we would contribute $9.96 to that particular product just for the factory overhead. And that's what the first question asks us, and I'm going to pull up, here it is, the first question on page 2. Compute the predetermined overhead rate using the traditional costing method with machine hours as our basis. So basically what that's saying is, for every hour that we use the machine, how much do I need to spread that cost out? And that's what I just did. We simply take out your calculator. It's a simple, you might even be able to do it in your head, the 995,000 total cost and divide it out evenly among the 100,000 machine hours. Part 2 of the question, let's pull up part 2. Part 2, and this one is where I got stumped at first, and I was reading it, and when I tried to answer it the first time I got it wrong, and I couldn't, so I had to reread it more carefully. First time I read this question, I read it as, what is the manufacturing overhead per stairway? And that's not exactly what it said. Maybe if it was a little clearer, it would have said, what is the total cost per stairway? But it says, what is the manufacturing cost? So that means the entire cost, not just the overhead with the traditional costing. So what we got to do is come back up here, and so part B, we're starting with this very, if you haven't read through the problem, go ahead and maybe pause and read through, but just briefly here, this is our total expected for the entire year, how much overhead cost we're going to have. This is how we could possibly split up those costs over an entire year, the number of uses. And this is for a particular kind of order. We're going to have 250 stairways. And starting with part B, they're focusing in on that specific order of 250 stairways. So what they're saying is, what is the total cost for those 250 stairways? Well, that includes our 2 out of 3 main ones that are pretty easy to divvy up. We can pretty accurately determine what our direct materials and direct labor are. And so that's the first step in doing this. We're going to determine, okay, for total manufacturing costs, we definitely have our materials of $104,200 plus our labor of $104,200. and our labor of 112,700. And then finally, we got to divvy up how much factory overhead should go with this. And well, we just determined that the cost per hour for factory overhead for machine hour was $9.96. And the final thing that it tells us here is, well, if it's $9.96 for 1 hour, how much is that for 14,900 hours? And that's simply what we're going to be doing here. And that's what I did on this second, on my answer sheet here, taking the 104,200 plus the 112,700 for direct labor, and then adding in our factory overhead using the very traditional base, saying for every hour, add $9.96. So when you add up these three, I got $365,304. That's total cost. Now here, yeah, it's looking for total cost, but it wants to know total cost per stairway. So then we just simply take our 365 and divide it by the 250 actual stairways. And that's how I got this cost of $1461.22. Now when we get to part C, they're saying, okay, if that's the traditional, now let's break it down per with using activity based. I'm going to pull up the here. They want us to be able to determine here, they're going to break this down in a couple different parts. And the first part is saying if we were just to make one item, actually they want to break it down even further. They want to say how much purchasing cost should there be per order. Okay, so what we want to do is go back up here, and this is this part of the problem is the easiest part, because we simply want to determine, okay, if there's $73,800 in purchasing, I need to break that down over 600 purchasing orders. So we just do the simple math there. 73,800, spread that out over 600 orders. And for that particular activity, we can easily then go in and see that for every order that's made, we need to tack on $123 of factory overhead, 73,800. And let's look at number 2, or the second item. Handling materials. I have $82,080 to spread about amongst my number of moves. It says handling materials. We're going to divide that out by how many times somebody has to pick it up and move it. And they're saying there's 8,000 times over the year that something gets moved. So every time something is moved, how much money do I need to allocate there? So we simply take the 82,000 divided by the 8,000. That's where I came up with the 1026. If you haven't already, go ahead and pause this lecture video and see what you get for the remaining 5 items. And just in a couple seconds here, I'm going to scroll down and show you the answers to compare, and then we'll move on to the final 2 sections. Okay, here's the final 5 answers of the production, setting up machines, all the way down to utilities. Now, we're going to be using this to calculate C2. C2 simply says calculate the total overhead assigned under ABC. Well, if for those 250 horses, if there was only one order, well, it'd be $123. But when I look up here, when I look up at our original instructions, there isn't just one order for this 250. There's 60 orders. So I simply need to go through now for each one of these, for each of those that we just calculated, 123 for one, but we have 60. So I need to take 60 times, and I know it's kind of hard to read, it got a little cut off there, but that 123 that we just calculated. And if you do the math there, you get $7,380 that needs to be allocated from our factory overhead. And then handling. It tells us in the problem that there are 800 times that we handle for these 250 products, 800 touches. And for every touch, it's $10.26. So we simply do the math again. And I didn't put the little answer out there, but you can easily get that. We need to do this now for the remaining 5 items. Exactly what we just did for these first 2. Go ahead and pause and see what you get total when you, and then we'll go through the answer. Once you add up all 7 of these costs, I didn't put them all out here, but you should have gotten $81,614. That's the number you wanted to get to. And that's going to help us derive now our final answer. Because it's saying here, our total overhead with this activity base should have only been $81,614. When if we were doing it the old way, remember back up here, our total was quite a bit higher. It was nearly $149,000. $149,000 compared to 81, we were charging way too much in factory overhead for that particular product. Should have only been 81,000. And so they're saying on this last item, it's just like, I believe it was A2 above, give us not just the factory manufacturing overhead, but give us the total cost to make one stairway in this problem. So the total cost, well, the first 2 don't change. Our direct materials of $104,200 plus our direct labor, those were the same as above. The only thing different now is instead of using that almost $149,000 in overhead, we're using what we just calculated, the $81,614. So when we add up our total cost, I got $298,514. Divide that over the 250 items that we had. And now instead of our cost being about $1,460, our cost has gone way down to only $1,194. So therefore, we can probably sell it a little cheaper and still make the profit that we wanted because the cost per item isn't nearly as high. Okay, we're going to switch gears now and look at exercise 18-5. And I have this one on a Word document. Take me just a second here to pull it up. Okay. Here we are. 18-5, you should have something that looks very similar to this, and this is I cut and pasted some of the items from Wiley Plus because I wanted to write in a few things. But basically what they're giving us here is we're making, I can't even remember what it was we're making, but anyway, we're making 190 items of, we're making safes, and this is probably one thing that I should have, I'm going to go ahead and put in here. This is our mobile safes, or the small ones, and this is the wall safes, the walk-in, I believe is what they called it, safes. So as you can see, we make quite a bit more mobile safes, the smaller ones, 190 versus 60. However, even though we make more of the mobile, we use quite a bit less labor. And that's going to come in to be important here on our first step when we're looking at the traditional method. And that's what it's asking us here in the traditional. It's saying if we have $271,000 to allocate, how are we going to spread that out between the mobile safes and the walk-in safes? And the traditional easy way of doing it is they're saying, well, let's just divide it out by how many direct labor hours we have. Okay, so let's do that. Well, before we can even start, we need to find a couple things because it just doesn't give us everything. We're going to have to do a little math to figure some of this stuff out. So I got in our little handout here, these are the two answers that we want to finally get to. We want to find out how much overhead cost should go to the safe, to one safe, and how much should go to one walk-in closet. So before we can do that, though, we need to first find a couple items. And that's what I've typed out here in this. Hopefully this will help us. The first thing we need to find is our factory. We need to split up and divvy out our factory overhead per direct labor hour. So for every labor hour that something takes, how much overhead do we apply? And what we want to do here, so just take the 271, our full factory overhead costs, and divide it by how much labor did we incur for this time period. And just simply do the division then. So what this is saying is for every direct labor hour that something takes to make, we need to add in $107.54 of overhead. Pretty cut and dry. It's just one method, and that's why it's the traditional and the easier one. And then the second thing we need to find is, well, it doesn't come out and tell us, how do I know how many hours it takes to make just one safe? Well, that's hopefully not too hard once we look at this a little deeper. If it takes 810 hours to make 190 safes, we just need to do the simple math here and take 890 divided by how many units I make. And for this one, it says when you do the calculation, I get 4.26 on number of hours. In Wiley, it tells you to round it to the second decimal point. I found that sometimes doesn't work. You need to take it out to about the fourth or fifth decimal on this example for these two for this example and the one right next to it that we're going to do right below. So take this one out to the fourth or fifth decimal, and because Wiley Plus will give you about a 10-cent leeway either way, but if you're off by about 30 cents, which could easily happen if you round, they'll count it wrong even though you really have it probably right. So go ahead and take it out to the fourth decimal. And the walk-ins, let's do the same thing. We had 1,710 hours over 60 safes. So for each safe, for walk-in safes, it takes about 28 and a half hours to make one item. Now we can go ahead and find what they're actually asking for. How much overhead do I need to apply for one mobile small safe? Well, it takes 4.2632 hours, so about 4.25 hours. And we decided that it was $107.54 per hour. So for one safe, I need to go ahead and show that it's $458.46. And then for one walk-in safe, it takes me 28.5 hours. And the charge is $107.54 per hour over 28.5 hours. Every walk-in safe, I need to add an extra $3,064.89 in factory overhead costs. Now they want us to do in the next section, part 2, is start looking at the activity-based part of it and start separating out costs not just by labor, but over material moves and purchase orders. Okay. So for part 2, it tells us of the 271, they broke it down now into 2 categories instead of just one. First one we're going to look at is material handling costs. That's what it's asking us in the first question here. How much material handling cost do we need to assign for just one safe? So this is half of the factory overhead we're looking at. And they're saying of the 271, 179 is for the materials. So we need to do this first step, second step again. the first thing we need to do is determine how much factory overhead for one move. How much does it cost, or how much cost if there's 179,000 total to be distributed amongst all the moves that we have? How much for just one? Well, we know how many moves there are in total. There's 590 moves when you add these two together. So if there's just one move, so that's our first step. For every time we touch this item and move it somewhere, we need to tack on $303.39. Well, the next thing is, how many moves are there per safe, per type of safe? Well, with the mobile one, there are 390 moves total. It tells us up here. It's 300, sorry. 300, I think I typed. Oh, no, I said it right. 300 moves in total to make 190 safes. So how many moves do I have per one safe? So that should be pretty easy for us to calculate. I move it approximately 1.5 times the material stuff, 1.5 times. And the walk-in, we're going to do the same thing. To make 60 items, it took me 290 moves. To make one, if you do the math, it takes 4.833. Keep those decimals going out to about the 4th decimal at least for the final calculations. Now that we have our two numbers that we need, it takes $303 per move, and to make the mobile, there's a little over 1.5 moves. I can find the total cost of factory overhead needed for the mobile. Same thing for the walk-in. It takes $303.39 per move. There are 4.8 and change moves to make one walk-in. So I need to calculate that for every walk-in safe, there's $1,466 of cost. And that would be my two final answers for that section. You then do the same thing for the next activity base. The next activity base is the purchasing activity. And we're going to do the exact same thing just with the purchasing numbers that we just did for this section. So pause it, take a few minutes and work this out, and then look at the answers here that I have and see how close you come to my answers. The last thing they want us to do on this one is give a recap. What was the traditional costing for one item? Well, we already did that. If we scroll all the way back up to the beginning, for one item, we did that here as part of the first section, one of the first sections here. For one mobile item, it was $458 total. You just only have one calculation because it's the traditional easy way, instead of maybe the more accurate but takes more time activity cost base. So $458 of factory overhead for every one item. $3,000 and change for every wall. So that's what I put here. Now we're going to compare that to maybe the little bit more accurate way, the activity-based costing. It takes a little longer. And I've got here $757 of factory overhead for every one, which is quite a big jump. More than half, again, of the traditional. And how did I get to 757? All I got to do is take the two sections that we just did. For materials, it was $479, and for handling, for purchasing, it was $278. Add up the $479 plus the $278, and you get the $757 for one safe instead of the much less $458. So maybe we weren't charging enough for the mobile, whereas we were maybe charging way too much for the walk-in, because when you add up the two walk-ins, they only cost really $2,100 and change compared to 3,000, a little over 3,000. So the activity base does take longer, but it could help you become a lot more accurate in knowing which item is more profitable in the end. Because you don't want to keep selling these mobile ones and put all your attention here when really the cost was a lot more than you thought and the walk-ins were a lot less than you thought. Okay, I hope that helps you. Let me know if you want to leave a comment in the YouTube. It helps me to figure out if these videos are helpful. And again, we'll see you back next week for our Chapter 19, Week 5 material before our first exam in Week 6.